Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
I'm Dion Mitchell here with Mehul Anjaria. In today's podcast, we're going to discuss a few cases in the news that are really in the sweet spot for Crime Redefined. That's the R.Kelly and Jussie Smollett case. Yeah. You know, when we first started this whole adventure with the Crime Redefined, I don't think we in our wildest imagination could have, picked two more cases that really hit to the center of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, crime and the media. And of course, I'm going to put the defense pitch on it as well. And really, you could talk about politics in this also. It just so happened that last week I happened to be in Chicago when both of these cases were blowing up in the media. And as a matter of fact, I was actually staying in the Streeterville section of downtown Chicago, which is right where Jussie Smollett lives. And it was kind of funny because I was very curious to go see the crime scene or farce scene. And when I was there, I was busy and I wasn't able to find the address. But I looked it up later, and sure enough, I was 2 blocks away from it. And ironically, the Jussie Smollett scene is just a few blocks away from Trump Tower in Chicago, which is where R.Kelly stays.
The irony of all of this is unbelievable. And also that I knew your investigative skills as a DNA expert and scientist would kick in, and that you'd be out there on the streets exploring everything.
I was looking to do my own investigation.
Look at that. Crime Redefined on the streets for you in Chicago. So that's good stuff. I mean, you mentioned politics, but there's also the politics of the entertainment, the politics of the studio, the production company, and the talent, and the politics of what takes place on a set, which is a mini corporation in itself and a giant family at the same time. So there's a lot of dynamics to especially the Smollett case.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting if you just read how the studio, how their statements would evolve. This case moves so quickly, but the studio first is like, hey, the guy's integral to Empire, he's not going anywhere. Then it became tepid, and then it was the dreaded, we're weighing our options. And all this within 3 days.
Well, I'd like to be a fly on the wall. I'd like to be a fly on the wall for a lot of these conversations, but I think the two ones that I would be great to be in the room was the tipping point when the Chicago police in the Smollett case knew that this isn't what it appeared to be, and that he was most likely allegedly lying. And then the other conversation would have been the studio heads, the executive producer for Empire, and the PR department, because of course you're going to defend him, but they probably already had been in contact with the Chicago police and knew that something was up. So how do you try to get out from underneath this rock at the same time not look like you're abandoning one of your stars?
No doubt. Now, I don't want to do a complete turn here, but I got to tell you, I am almost done watching Surviving R.Kelly on Lifetime.
Do you want to start with that then?
I think so. And, when that came out, I think, just a few weeks ago, I was interested, but it wasn't must-see TV for me. But as soon as R. Kelly was arrested, I was all over it. So I think I've watched everything except for part of the last episode. So if you don't mind, why don't we start there?
That sounds good. And I guess from, not, as outside looking in, not working in the justice system, have nowhere near the experience that you do. What I want to know is what makes today's case different than the 2008 case where they actually had videotape? I mean, what's it going to take to get a conviction in this one versus the first one?
Well, I guess let's just do a little bit of a autopsy on the 2008 trial and just kind of look at what happened there. And, the first thing is that there was a 6-year delay between the time that R. Kelly was arrested and the time that this went to trial. And in many cases, this will favor the defense. Why? Well, witnesses' memories fade, their desire to cooperate wanes. It just becomes much harder to try a case. Now, in terms of R. Kelly's public persona and the opinion of him in the court of public opinion, he actually had a chance to rehab his image because during those 6 years, he was putting out hit music as well. So that's why another reason why the public was starting to forget about how heinous this was. But in terms
I know I did. I mean, it's like, it's like when this case popped back up, it was almost like it was the first time because it seemed like they'd wrapped his arms around him again and he was accepted in. He was showing to an awards show. Producers were working with him again. I mean, it's crazy in 6 years how quickly he was able to rehabilitate his persona.
Well, and you can't help but wonder if it takes a case with video evidence, 6 years to go to court, you start thinking they must have some problems with this case. I mean, right. I had one out on the East Coast recently where it took something like 8 years to go to trial, and there was a DNA supposed hit and match. So you start wondering, well, why did it take so long to go? If they knew who it was, they arrested him. We start poking around in it, and sure enough, there were some problems, and the guy it was actually not guilty.
Wow.
So coming back to R. Kelly, okay, I mean, yeah, you had the videotape, but what were the problems? Well, the girl or woman in the videotape actually denied it was her. And although there were relatives testifying at trial who identified her, not all of them did, and some of them didn't even say, that it was her. And you did not have a victim testifying. So the state's attorney did not call the victim or the parents. Now, the real reason, my understanding, is that they weren't cooperative. But so the way the state's attorney spun it is that, hey, well, listen, you know what? We don't want to re-traumatize someone by putting them through trial and having to relive it. But the other thing you have to look at is if you put a 14-year-old girl on the stand, man, that's powerful for the jury. You put a girl in her 20s, it's not quite as powerful. It's hard for the jury to see that this was a kid that was being molested.
Right. Do you think that there was, because of the parents being reluctant, and especially kind of thinking about the case that he just was bonded out on, do you think that there was an exchange of money?
Who knows?
Because in the propers for today's case, there was, in the write-up there was, where he had left money in an envelope for her, and she assumed it was for a cab, but it was obviously too much money. So this was a backhanded way of saying, here you go. So I'm just wondering whether through him or his people, someone back then had made the same attempt or accomplished it.
Well, how can someone pull off something like this? Well, it's by the power of their fame and their position and their money. So why wouldn't that extend to influencing the trial directly as well? I mean, that's right. A very real possibility.
Was there anything that came out about that at the time?
No, I don't know. I don't recall if there was a specific allegation on that. But, there's other reasons why witnesses don't want to come forward. They could be embarrassed. They may not want the public spectacle. So there's a whole host of reasons, but it just was fascinating because you could have a court case where the victim won't testify, but you don't typically have a videotape of that person as well to go with it.
Right.
Another interesting question, too, is that he wasn't charged with rape or statutory rape in the first trial. He was charged with child pornography. And that seemed odd to me. And I guess the explanation, at least that I heard in the documentary, was that child pornography is a lot easier to prove. And the other hurdle they had is that although they had a videotape, they didn't have a date as to when it actually occurred. So they couldn't charge that, hey, on such and such date, this went down. So because of those complications, they went for the pornography charge.
Was there anything else in the 2008 case you want to cover before we move into the 19 case?
Well, I was just going to say they had one other witness who might have been strong. And this was a female who apparently had sex with both of them, the 14-year-old girl and R. Kelly. So obviously she would be a powerful witness to say that this went down. But she had problems in her background that the defense was able to leverage. Supposedly she stole a watch from R. Kelly, and she had a couple of current boyfriends who were felons. So the defense, doing what they do, were able to discredit her.
So she's obviously there's some motivation or, something that just looked a little bit checkered, that she wasn't going to be as strong as some of the other witnesses.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's kind of what went down with the first trial. But I'm going to throw it back to you. So how do you like R. Kelly's chances this time around?
That's a great question, because it seems in today's justice system, and I hate to admit this, but it just seems like if you have fame, money, and power, all bets are off.
I think as a general comment, that's true. But now you have to weigh that with the Me Too movement. That
is a great point. Yeah,
what the norms are for how these things go.
Yeah, I think, in fact, I was thinking about that yesterday, that that may be the only thing that really does them in on this one, is that there's the momentum, the groundswell out there to, I don't know, kind of stone just about anybody that comes anywhere near this movement. So he may not have as friendly as an audience as he did on, in the 2008 case. More importantly, I think that the motivation for the prosecutors and police department and detectives in Chicago is a completely different. I think that's an interesting political angle here, is I think that they're tired of being the doormat and kind of, the brunt of all these jokes about, corruption and crime and all that. So I think that they're out to prove a point as well and get some high profile convictions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that may well be true. And, you say, well, okay, in the first trial you had videotape. Well, what do you want? DNA? Well, now we have DNA in this trial as well. So then you start wondering, in the first trial, there's such a thing called a CSI effect. And it's a bit of a dated term, I would say, but basically when the CSI TV show came out, forensics was more in the public view, and potential jurors were looking at all these techniques and wondering why they're not used on every case. So in R. Kelly, you had videotape, but then you wonder, was there a question, hey, could this be a doctored videotape? There was some discussion about a mole on R. Kelly's back, and was that real or was that just noise in the video? And it may be that the appetite of the jurors for scientific evidence is so strong that they do want DNA in addition to the videotape, particularly if you don't have strong witnesses to go with it. So I wonder if that CSI effect is in effect here as well. So now we really have three things against R. Kelly. We've got, Avenatti seems to have a new videotape every other day.
What do you think? What do you think about that? I mean,
how does he get these?
How does he get these, and how is he always able to inject himself into the most high-profile cases from Newport Beach, California?
Yeah, right. I know. It's like he fizzled there for a while, I think, with the Stormy Daniels, and then he had his own, the domestic violence allegation. He was quiet for a while. He went from possibly running for president to being quiet. Now, all of a sudden, these tapes are dropping in his hands, and one seems more powerful than the next. So, he's always in it.
What's that line? If you want to stop me, you better kill me.
That's about it.
Oh man, that guy, he finds a way. I'll be curious if he actually produces the goods this time.
Yeah.
And why anybody would reach out to him for representation in the first place is beyond me.
So, in the now there's a lot of paperwork online, so you can actually pull the indictment and the bond proffer. So the indictment, there's 10 charges, sex-related crimes. Basically, that's 4 victims, but there's multiple sex acts being charged on some of the victims. And I understand there's some more victims coming forward as well. So I don't know how that indictment might grow. And then the other document that you can find pretty easily online is the bond proffer. So the idea is there has to be a hearing as to whether or not a defendant is going to get bond or bail. And rather than calling a bunch of witnesses and making a big production out of it, each side can submit what's called a proffer, which is basically a document and saying, hey, if I were to call witnesses, this is the type of testimony I would elicit. And then the judge can decide what the bond would be. So if you look at that bond proffer, it's a nice summary. You've got the 4 victims, and 3 of them were underage at the time of the alleged incidents. And a lot of this went on pre-first trial. So we're talking 1998, 2000. One of the victims was actually of age. She was 24 at the time of the incident, and that incident was in 2003. And perhaps the most bizarre one, and if you watch the Surviving R.Kelly, this was mentioned, but there was a 16-year-old girl who actually attended R.Kelly's trial back in 2008. She sort of went as a fan, wanted to meet him, and she did. And she talked to him and stayed in touch with him. And so after the trial is when allegedly he was having sex with her as well. So, and I think I talked about the hairdresser, the one who was of age, 24 years old, and that occurred in 2003. But so we said there was some DNA evidence here, and it's interesting. So in the one case, and this is the 16-year-old girl who R. Kelly met after the trial, the first trial, she saved a shirt that she was wearing when R. Kelly ejaculated on her. And
a little Monica Lewinsky play here.
Yes, not a dress, but a shirt.
I had to.
Yeah, that's a little off color, but okay, we'll forgive it. So, I don't have a DNA report in front of me. They just say the semen DNA matched R. Kelly. And then the second case that had DNA evidence was the 24-year-old hairdresser. Again, a shirt with semen DNA that matched R. Kelly. Now, being a defense DNA expert, I'm not going to just settle and submit to that necessarily. So, if it's just a semen stain from R. Kelly, it's probably a lot of DNA. It's probably not a difficult interpretation, and it matches him. But let's see. Sometimes the DNA is not as conclusive as you think. Sometimes there could be an error. I had a case recently, semen in a vagina, supposedly a match. However, it was a DNA mixture, and the statistical power was not that great. So it didn't specifically identify the person. So it could be that R. Kelly's a possible donor, but he's not included to the tune of 1 in 38 quadrillion or something like that. Now,
here's a question, though. In court, when you're arguing this and you start to get down the weeds about the mixture, it really comes down to the power of who's arguing this. Can they, I guess, in the juror's mind, water this down so much, so to speak, that it loses its power that his DNA was there?
Well, it's not. See, this is the question, though. It's where the statistic comes out. If it's 1 in 38 septillion that it's R. Kelly, there is no argument that it's not his DNA. It's either R. Kelly or R. Kelly's identical twin. But let's say there is a convoluted mixture. There's not a lot of semen. And let's say that statistic is 1 in 5,000. That's not as impressive, And so, but a jury might hear that and say, well, it's R. Kelly's DNA. The argument is, no, it could be R. Kelly, but because 1 in 5,000 people could have it, there's a lot of other people in the United States and even in Illinois who could have that.
Well, I guess that's kind of my question, though, because you've been, in the court, obviously on the witness stand. When the jurors start hearing this, 1 in 5,000 or 1 in 100, do they just go blind? Kind of mentally blank?
Yes. So you really have to educate them, and you have to give them examples. So if I say, well, it's 1 in 100, that means if I looked at 100,000 people, there would be 1,000 people who would have that DNA. So you got to bring down those numbers into an understandable format to basically say that this does not specifically identify that person. It could be him, but this is not the DNA that you read about. This is not
that could go either way then, right? You've probably seen it go either way.
Yeah. Now, it also depends on the other facts in the case, right? If there's a lot of other facts that point to the defendant, jury might say, well, you know what? Yeah, that DNA is not as strong as it should be, but guess what? It doesn't eliminate that person.
Right.
So, it just all depends in the context of the case. And so that's why even when you see DNA evidence in the R. Kelly case, hold on a minute. Now, let me throw something a little more nefarious at you. It would seem, at least if you watch a documentary, that there's probably a lot of R. Kelly semen, in that house. So let me just throw it out there and see what you think, right?
I know where you're going.
Exactly where I'm going. What if, both of these individuals found a shirt, found a source of R. Kelly semen, and it got on there? Well, guess what? the DNA testing doesn't look any different if R.Kelly ejaculated directly on there, or if they found a source of his semen and put it on the shirt. It doesn't look any different. So I'm not saying there's any evidence of that happening here, but these are the minutia that you have to look at when you're defending a case like this. And that's why you need to do a full investigation before any of this looks like it's, drop dead slam dunk evidence.
Okay, so I just want to go back just for a second, because that point is, it shouldn't be overlooked. But this goes back to one of our earlier episodes about the transfer, and it was the basically, I think it was the ambulance one, right?
Yes.
Okay, can you just briefly tie that case to this one so, listeners can get an idea of what you're talking about and how important that is?
Well, it's a little bit of a different scenario, because here it's not like invisible transfer of minute amounts of DNA. I was giving the example where, let's say that they had a condom that had R. Kelly's semen in it, and then they just emptied that on the shirt.
Oh, right.
So
right.
That's a little bit different than when we talk about, say, a handshake example. I shake your hand, I touch a gun, all of a sudden your DNA is on the gun. That's a classic DNA transfer scenario that takes a little more imagination. This is akin to planting, sort of what I was getting at. And again, I'm not saying that happened, but this could be a defense that could come up.
Hey, I mean, I would not expect, based on this, if the defense team is listening, I'm going to call Mehul and Anjaria, because they could go on there, they bring you on and lay exactly that out, that they had, it was a frame up, that they went into his house, they saw an empty condom, an unused or used condom, they put it on their shirt. I mean, they could play the whole he was framed route.
Hey, listen, there's
right?
Yeah, there's limitations to DNA, no matter how strong the statistics are. Generally, you can't figure out how or when DNA was deposited on an item. So it does leave open avenues for defenses if you can supplement it with something else that shows that may have happened.
Right. So there's no timestamp on when it was placed.
There you go.
Right. Wow. So I guess this is going to be a fun one to follow over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and the geek part of me hopes that there's some DNA reports and all that kind of stuff to look at, so I can really get in there, because I'm just not going to take their word for it that there's a DNA match.
Right. When those come out, we'll have to definitely do an episode around that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, should we move on to Mr. Smollett?
Yeah, I mean, this is some crazy stuff. I'd like to start by saying, you can't make this stuff up, but apparently you can.
Well, you're full of jokes today.
Allegedly. I mean, this brings together some really, really powerful issues. I mean, I don't think we're going to list them all out there, but this is some interesting stuff for society and for politics and greed and everything.
It also shows that perhaps if you're an actor, it doesn't necessarily make you a good director.
That's a great point. Nice comeback.
Thank you.
I think one of the takeaways that I had reading his proffer, which was really detailed, and you get a chance out there to track that down, I recommend the read, is in the 21st century, trying not to leave a digital footprint is virtually impossible. And even if you don't, and you did before, that's a red flag. So say, for example, you go digitally off the grid, but the day before you're on Facebook, you're using Uber, you're using credit cards, and then all of a sudden you stop that cold, a crime happens, and then you pop back up again. Even that can be a red flag. What did you do for those 24 hours? What did you do for those 48 hours where your phone was turned off and you didn't use Uber? But when the police were laying out this digital timestamp of, the videotape in the store and the Uber and the credit card and the taxi, all of them now with video beyond just the digital records, I mean, it's got to be almost impossible to try to, to pull something like this off.
I mean, do you remember the days where all you had to do was take a rag and wipe your fingerprints off, and then you could pretty much cover your tracks? I mean,
yeah, those days are long gone. And the more that these digital uses that are more built in to our lifestyle, the more it becomes you're used to it, and you don't think about, hey, I need to stop doing that if you're going to try to pull off a crime.
Yeah, exactly. There becomes too many things to think about if you're trying to commit the perfect crime.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, if I was the brothers and someone came up to me and in the story, I know it's a star, but just run away as fast as you can. This is not going to end up well.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking, the allegations that they were paid $3,500, and well, that seems kind of low to take on that kind of risk.
Yeah, that is definitely the risk and reward factor there is not great. I mean, $3,500 and I could be looking at a couple of years in prison.
Yeah. Some politics, of course, in this case as well. It's interesting that the state's attorney, Kim Foxx, actually had to recuse herself from the case. Apparently, she had received a past campaign donation from one of Smollett's attorneys. So based on that, she felt there was a possible conflict and had to step aside.
Yeah, I think depending on where you sit on the politics of these, sometimes it may be a smart move to just get as far away as you can, because there is going to be no winners in this at all. Because if you vigorously try to prosecute him, you're a bad guy, and then if you're tied to him and you have aspirations for a higher political office, like I believe she does, that could be bad if you're somehow associated with him. So, I mean, this is just, as this net goes further out, this is just going to get uglier and uglier.
Yeah, and just tying into that, Chicago had their mayoral election yesterday. Of course, there's a runoff now, but, guess who chooses who the police chief is going to be? The mayor. Right. So we had the police chief giving this big press conference last week on Jussie Smollett, and my jaw just dropped and hit the floor when I heard this.
I was thinking about you, and I was thinking, wow, this is the definition of tried in the court of public opinion.
This is tried in the court of public opinion, and it's going from one extreme to another. So when this whole adventure started out, in the media, we heard about the attack, and we had the media up in arms about the attack. We had celebrities expressing their concern and outrage as to what happened to Smollett. And basically, everybody was jumping to conclusions before there was an investigation. And this caused a huge amount of embarrassment for celebrities and media and you name it. Well, didn't that press conference do the same thing on the other side? I mean, I know that they have some evidence, but this isn't evidence that's been vetted in court or it hasn't been cross-checked by a defense attorney. So they're coming out and saying not only how strong the evidence, but how bad of a person Jussie Smollett is. And the police chief is taking it personal. He's emotional and opinionated. And these are not the hallmarks of a good investigator by any stretch of the imagination. And basically, to me, it was like kind of trying the defendant in the media. On top of that, you're kind of laying out your whole case, for the defense attorney to start thinking what they're going to do with it and figuring out where they're going to poke and prod. And just one little thing that I caught that I don't know if many people saw, but the police chief was talking about one of Jussie Smollett's attorneys. And he said something to the effect that, you may have seen them on TV. In other words, he's a media whore. And I noticed that one of the detectives in the background kind of smirked when he said that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's pretty typical. But, pardon me, sir, but what are you doing right now? I understand you need a press conference because this is a heated thing in the media and in the politics and race, but to interject emotion and give so much detail and go on and not be objective and mechanical is inappropriate. Now, some say that because of the mayoral election that the police chief, ramped his game up. And now he's on a media tour talking to CNN and every other TV show. I don't know about all that, but it's just interesting how all of this comes into play in these types of cases.
But isn't that the game now? I mean, isn't the game, it used to be, okay, the investigation, the facts will speak for himself. And so it was maybe 80% the facts, the investigation, 20% the PR. But I think it's flipped. I think now the game from all sides is 80% PR. Get out in front, get your narrative established, and then 20% investigation. And the case that really left a mark on me was is it Samantha Knox
Amanda
in Italy?
Knox.
Amanda Knox, that case, and how the prosecutors were able to just paint her in the ugliest light possible. And I was watching this, I was talking with some friends, and I was saying, you know, if you get into any trouble, your first call should be to the best PR person that you can find
right.
and the attorney's second,
right.
because you want to get your narrative established before anybody else can box you in. And I saw that, and that's exactly what I was thinking about in this press conference. He is basically marketing his side of the case and flipping the script, because he knows the amount of sympathy that's going to be on the other side.
Right. So now, how does Smollett get a fair jury in the city of Chicago?
Exactly. You think they asked for file for a motion to move the case?
Well, you know, he's got Mark Geragos on the team now.
Yeah,
he knows a little something about law and media, so that was an excellent move on his part. So yeah, I could just see the defense attorneys just shaking their head when this press conference is going on, and actually licking their chops, because I mean, what great ammunition for showing a very biased police department, tainting the jury pool. I mean, you name it, all the allegations that could come from that media spectacle that we saw.
Well, that kind of goes to my earlier point that I think the Chicago police department, I think, has got some pent-up frustrations, and they obviously want to do this by the book, but they're, like I said, they're tired of being everybody's joke, and I think that they're trying to get out in front of this a little bit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of raw wounds there. Of course, some people are saying, well, gee, you got all these murders in Chicago. Are they getting the same type of attention that the Jussie Smollett case is? So I understand that they're under that.
But I don't know if they had a choice. I mean, just think if they didn't, put 20 detectives on it, they would have been screamed at just the same.
Yeah, you're right, because if they didn't go at it hard, then the wrong narrative would have been out there for a long time. So they went hard. But look at it, in what, I don't know, 72 hours or whatever, boom, he's arrested. And that's because of good investigation.
Right, but especially because they would have been really, I hate to use the word crucified, but they would have been, because this was in the initial stages a hate crime.
Yes.
So if they didn't put the manpower into this one, oh man, they would have torn that city apart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a tough. I mean, I criticize the police chief, but I understand the tough pickle that he's in. Now, I got a question for you. You, sir, have been on many a Hollywood set, and by the way, as an aside, if our listeners want to go to our Zero Cliff Media Twitter, you can see some throwback Thursday pictures of.
No, you didn't just do that, did you?
So if you want to see Dion in his glory, go to our Twitter feed. Look at our Throwback Thursdays, and you can see some cool things like videos of Dion getting beat up by Lorenzo Lamas and all kinds of fun stuff. If you're going to go there
and take the time to enjoy a good laugh at my expense, please be sure to follow us.
So here's my question, now that I've ribbed you a bit. Have you ever had a situation where you were on a set and there was a key cast member who was involved in some sort of controversy, and then you were there when they sort of came back to the set for the first time after the scandal?
Yes. I won't name any names.
Right.
But I've seen this situation actually a number of times. And like I said before, these sets are like 70% family and then 30% business. Mm-hmm. So you have the executive producers or the line producers there that are running the ship, every day to make sure, you're getting your pages in and everything's going smoothly. But at the same time, you're spending more time with these folks than you are with your family. You're out there from, 10, 15 hours a day. So you're really close, everybody's secrets. And there are no secrets on a set because of the gossip, factors like 10x on these sets. And there was a situation where one of the stars got a DUI. And he was, let's just say he was detained for a couple of days. So you have the set just literally sitting on their hands, and the executive producers and producers just going crazy because they're paying, a couple $100,000 a day for a crew to sit there.
Let me ask you this, and of course, I know you can't give some details, but if it's just a DUI, typically people aren't detained a couple of days. Was there something more serious along with it?
Yes.
Accident or? Yeah,
there were some other, circumstances that made it a little bit more complicated.
Fair enough.
And so we're just sitting here, and everybody's, trying to figure out, what's going on. Now, on the one hand, you're not too sad because you're getting overtime. You're going to have to make this stuff up, so you're making extra cash. But then where that particular situation, and I'll come back to what happened when he came back to the set. But what happens is when it comes time for a season 2 or a season 3, these types of situations come back into play. And I personally think that the show wasn't renewed because of these types of situations that happened with the star. Let's just say it this way. It didn't help.
Sure.
And so when he came back out to the set and went to kind of, obviously there was a closed door meeting where he said whatever he had to say, and then he actually came out to the set the first day, and it was crazy. It was like, everybody didn't know how to act. Do you throw your arms around him and give him a big kiss,
right.
Everybody was just trying to stay out of the way. It was really it's like having an angry father come home and you don't want to get yelled at, so you kind of go hide in your closet. And so he comes back in and he actually broke the ice and said, "Hey, listen, I just want to apologize." And I mean, there was actually some tears, and I have to say, it was a pretty emotional situation. And I had never, to that point, had really seen anything like that. Here's this guy making, 30, in those days anyway, $40,000 a week. He's a well-known star. And then to come in and just kind of lay it on the carpet right like that was pretty crazy to watch. And it's something where it's really uncomfortable, and you feel, you kind of have some compassion. So I would not want to have been in that room when he came back, because it's tough to watch.
Well, what struck me is that Smollett, he bails out of jail, he goes to a court hearing, and he goes immediately to the set, supposedly to film that day. I'm like, in what kind of condition would this guy be to work?
I was running that through my head, and I was like going, I just was shocked. I'm like, the last thing I would do would be able to go back and try to, perform.
Right.
At a high level would be impossible, because first of all, what are all your castmates thinking? When they're looking at you, trying to, 1 minute they were in your corner and backing you up and how terrible this is, and then the next minute, it's allegedly you lied about all this.
Yeah, I mean, can they hide their disdain on camera? How good is the acting?
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, I tip my hat to him. I mean, there's only a handful of people I think that could come in and pull that off.
Right. All right. I think we did about as much as we could with Mr. Kelly and Mr. Smollett. However, both of these are going to be going on for quite a while, and I'm sure we'll circle back in the podcast and hit it when there's some more information out.
Absolutely. I think I guess you could probably, this is probably a better comment to come from you, but, maybe is it the 50% rule? Just whatever you hear from both sides, cut it in half by 50%, and that's probably closer to the truth?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't worked out the exact percentage, but I'll go with that. That sounds about right.
I mean, there was just going to be a ton of spin for both these cases, and whatever the first salvos are, I think wait till you get to the fifth or sixth one before you get closer to what's really going on and what the truth is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to follow up with this. And we'll try to, every once in a while, try to jump in when there's a hot case, and if it's right in our wheelhouse again with crime and entertainment, we are going to plan to weigh in.
Excellent.
All right.
Thanks, Mehul.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.